Welcome to Zumi Recaps, let's start. At the right of succession, a mistress child, and a selfish tyrant prince, which is the honored one? Truth be told, there are enough reasons for Prince Rudolph to be targeted. For example, the dagger was inches from his face. The assassin who was Mahoraga asked the royal why he wasn't resisting. Unable to tell the truth, the young man just calmly looked forward, already well aware of his future. With this, the attack came. Several hours ago, in Baltic Empire's Scorpio Palace, the butlers and maids were in disarray, as the prince had been poisoned for 7 days already. One servant is scolded after wishing the young master death. After knocking on Rudolph's door, 2 maids entered and were shocked to find him awake, sitting on his bed with an ice-cold demeanor. The personal maid, Tappel, rushed to his side, ordering her companion, Maya, to call the physician immediately. Quickly getting to work, the palace is suddenly moving in a rush, despite the prince's nonchalant expression. The doctor came, but Rudolph simply found the commotion noisy, silently saying that there's no need to worry, as he certainly won't die. The health checkup goes by with most of the staff in the room, and the young boy can feel their disdainful gazes, as if wanting him to stay ill. Told to state his name and age, he does just that, proving the condition of his health. Then asked about his background, the honored one talks about being the 4th son of the emperor, blatantly sharing how his relatives despised and tried to kill him, as he's born of a harlot who wanted to join the family. Although surprised by the detail, the physician deems him well and asks that he continue to rest. Wishing him recovery using the reversed curse technique, everyone excuses themselves from the room. Left alone, Rudolph sat with his eyes facing the floor. His supposed servants are there to watch him, and are likely going to report the incident to their real masters, his brothers and the queen, who see him as nothing but a nuisance in the family. The 2 maids walk in the corridor, with Maya noting how odd it was for the prince to be so calm, despite nearly dying. Tappel shares the rumors of the palace being filled with spies. With no allies beside him, he could be assassinated any time, and is probably full of anxiety. In reality, Rudolph felt no fear at all, knowing he'd live for at least 10 more years. After all, he came from a point 300 years into the future, and is well aware of history. When he was on the verge of death from the poison, he recalled the memories from his previous life. In the far future of this era, he was born as a villager in a rural town, and after dying a peaceful death as an average man, his soul went back in time and space. From that point on, he lived his new life as the 4th prince. He would make a fuss whenever dissatisfied, cursing, yelling, and asking for unreasonable things, just like the hopeless tyrant he was. The person he was before regaining his memories was the worst, and he's disgusted at his past. As he sat in deep thought, wondering how he should live, guided by his knowledge from another time, a silhouette appeared in the window. Just then, a cloaked man burst into his room, gripping a dagger and pinning the boy to the floor. As the blade was inches from his face, the assassin looked at him in confusion, wondering why he wasn't resisting, and questioning if such situations don't scare him. Met with nothing but the eyes of a resolved young man, he waved the confusion away, raising his blade to bring it down harder. Suddenly, pained cries rang out. An arrow had lodged itself into the man's arm, sending him back and away from the prince. The guards that came gave one last warning. Realizing he's cornered, the assassin jumps out of the window he came in, prompting the palace soldiers to run after him. Worried, Tappel approached Rudolph, asking if he's okay, but is told to leave immediately after cleaning the broken glass, as he needs time to think. Although surprised by the command, they do as told, and he's left alone in his room once more. He looks unbothered at first, but taking a closer look, his face gave hints of relief over being saved. Despite knowing he wouldn't die, the thought of getting stabbed for real terrified him to the bones. That said, the history book he once reads seems genuine and reliable. The War Recurred was his past life's favorite book, and it was an epic poem praising the hero Wilhelm. That said, it was also filled with historical facts, detailing events dating to 300 years ago, including the attempt to poison and assassinate the 4th prince. Even though he expected it to be a failed attempt at his life, he has no desire to go through it again. Again, he's certain that there's no lethal threat right now, at least not one that'll be successful. After all, he's set to die and be killed 10 years from now, when he's 25 years old. He looked up, recalling what he read in the war record. Apparently, after his suspicion grew from the countless assassination attempts, he killed all his brothers. With that, he became known as the Cruel Emperor, leaving his name in history as an unprecedented tyrant. His personality likely broke due to fear and secession, and he's currently on the track to repeating history. Rudolph falls silent, caged in his thoughts. To not be loved and needed by anyone, he would curse everything and eventually die in suffering. The young prince gets up, refusing to accept his fate. Knowing history, he's determined to live fighting and surviving through it. As someone who possesses the memories of the future, he vows to take hold of his fate and change it. Taking something from his drawer, he finds a little jewelry box with a coin inside. One day, he promises to return it to a girl he met during childhood. The first step would be to resolve the problems in the palace by discerning who his enemies are and eliminating them. Soon after, a confused voice echoes in his room. Since work was delayed when he was sick, Rudolph is asking to see Scorpio Palace's ledger. Tapple is silent and unmoving. Facing the prince, the personal maid asks what's wrong, as he's never asked for the ledger before. He apologizes for pushing all work to her, but insists that he has to learn about his official duties anyway. She insists that he leave the chores to them, as the attempt at his life must have left him exhausted. The push and pull continues as he demands the ledger again, saying he's perfectly fine. However, she ignores the command, bringing the topic back to the assassin and promising to find him. The prince already knows that his brother sent the man. When he asks for the ledger again, Tapple suddenly hugs him tight, falling into tears and saying it's sad that he's accepted how he and his brothers will kill each other. She then reminds Rudolph of how she has served him since he was born, even acting on behalf of his mother. As his personal maid, she swears by the brooch around her neck, that no matter what danger may lie ahead, she will always be by his side as a reliable companion. Still hugged tightly by the woman, he confirms right then and there that she was the culprit. All this time she has been lining her pockets behind the scenes, filling them through dirty deeds. According to the war record, Tapple was always found to side the cruel emperor. She's a venomous woman who used his name, indulging in her desires and doing bad things in peaceful times. He tried setting a trap while asking for the ledger, and her bad acting implies that she's guilty. Pushing her away, Rudolph thanks the maid, silently deciding to rid her from his life, as it's necessary to keep his own peace. In order to do that, he needs definitive proof and won't allow the cunning woman to gloss it over. The prince maintains his politeness and asks her to explain everything about the ledger. She urgently gets moving as he instructs her to prepare dinner for now, intending to work right after. Soon enough, he finishes his meal, wiping his mouth clean and thinking about Tapple, who is likely scurrying to destroy evidence right away. Walking to her, he sees Maya, kneeling on the walkway and looking over broken pottery. He asks what's wrong, and is told that the handle suddenly broke, likely because of old age. Keeping the light-hearted atmosphere, he shares that the furniture in his room is also very old. They laugh about it for a moment, and she quickly prostrates herself, belatedly realizing who she's speaking to. He tries to stop her, but then understands how much of an object of fear he is for them. The maid runs off to fetch a rag, but he first asks for her name. Introducing herself, Maya sees him smile kindly, and is told that there's one thing he needs from her. Meanwhile, deep in the palace, screams of urgency rang out. Tapple orders the servants to work fast and make a fake ledger before the prince returns from his meal. Just then, Rudolph burst into the room, pushing past the butlers and demanding to know how long he has to wait. They're all shocked by his sudden appearance, and start to worry when he says he got tired of waiting. Tapple explains that she was checking the ledger, as there must not be flaws in what the prince sees. They stare each other down, and he takes the ledger from a pile of books nearby. Flipping through it, his eyes scan the pages, noting how they did a good job of matching the content and balancing the flow of money. He's about to give up on the evidence, when he suddenly smiles after getting an idea. Hearing that he sees nothing odd, Tapple proudly says that she's managing their finances well. Listening from the outside, a few servants hear him get to the climax, and ask about the furnishing expenses, which account for a lot of their money. Questioned, some are surprised, but the personal maid remains calm, explaining that they live in a palace directly bestowed by the emperor. She asks what he thinks the most important task is, and with full confidence says it's dignity. Seeing his confusion, she continues, saying furniture that undermines the imperial family's dignity must be replaced. In other words, old furniture is always replaced with new ones, eating most of their budget up. He understands her sentiments. That said, Rudolph then questions why so much of the furniture around them is old. They look around, and it's an undeniable fact. More than that, it's not only in the room they're in. From the hallways to the fixtures, there are lots of dated furnishings in the palace. Even the ones in his room are worn out, and there are no traces of the dignity she proudly spoke of. He takes a book from his overcoat, wondering if they know what it is. At first glance, it seems identical to the ledger he saw earlier, but it still has half the budget remaining. With this, he concludes that the ledger she has is fake. Tapple finally begins to panic, realizing the position she's in. Her loud cries are heard from outside, questioning who gave him the book. Everyone is shocked when one person steps forward. Maya entered the room, claiming responsibility of her giving the prince the ledger. Rudolph delightfully shares how she found it for him. Tapple argues that it's impossible, and that the one in his hands is fake. Her subordinate pushes back, insisting that the copy she gave is genuine. As proof, she shows the seal of Scorpio Palace, stamped in the ledger she found. It's a seal indicating an official document, and only the prince has access to it. This completely shuts the maid up, and he concludes the matter is decided. He snaps his fingers, and guards burst into the room, ordered to take the corrupt servants away. They begged and reasoned, with Tapple suddenly claiming to be blackmailed. Arguments erupt as the accountability is pushed to others. However, seeing the prince remain silent, she then banks on their 15 years of loyalty. Rage takes over, and she curses him with a terrible death, for throwing her away after one mistake. Her cries fall on deaf ears, and she demands to be released. Reaching out, anger turns into desperation, and she suddenly reveals how she knows who tried to kill him. Everyone had a horrified look on their face, as the prince remained still. Tears fell, and she tried to claw her way to him, begging for mercy. With a disgusted look, he repeats her words, and accuses her of ordering the assassinations herself. Struck with the realization that he knows, she sweats and trembles, wondering how he possibly found out. After killing his brothers to become the emperor, Rudolph solely relied on Tapple, who always stood by him. The poison and the killer, she deliberately made them attempt it, so that he would be suspicious of everything and trust only her. The maid screamed, desperate to hold on to her position, but the brute she swore her loyalty to fell to the ground, as she was dragged out of the room. Now he's going to double-check the ledger, as there might be other fraudulent activities in play. The declaration strikes fear in the servants' hearts, and they rush out to quickly get to work. Rudolph sighs in relief. With this, there should be fewer fraudulent activities. After a while, he exhales hard, finally releasing the fear that was lodged in his heart. He tried to act like a true Terran, but he can't keep up any longer. Done with the act, he thanks Maya for helping him out. However, she's unable to help herself from feeling worried. He calls to her and places the brute on her collar, assigning her as his personal maid moving forward. The sudden appointment shocks her, and she can't believe what's happening. After partaking in Tapple's ousting, she'll certainly be treated as a traitor among servants. Understanding her position, she bows and thanks him sincerely, promising to do her best. With this, Rudolph walked forward in a new light. He's sure he became the cruel emperor, because he had no trustworthy allies. To change history and live longer, he needs to collect as much loyalty as he can. 1 month later, the sun shined on Scorpio Palace as usual. To get more allies, the prince first needs to acquire a fiancé. Maya leads a woman through the halls, thanking her for complimenting the garden. Reaching their destination, they call to Rudolph, and the woman introduces herself as Liza, the eldest daughter of Fargrants. She continues, saying it's an honor to be chosen as his fiancé. However, he's less than enthusiastic to see the girl before him. The only sound heard is the cawing of crows, and he trembles at the very sight of her. He immediately writes her off from his options, as marrying Liza would surely end in nothing but his death. Liza has lustrous black hair that shines like onyx, radiant blue eyes that glisten like aquamarine, and an otherworldly beauty that sat before Rudolph. However, to him, an engagement with her would mean nothing but inescapable death. He knows the future 300 years from now, along with the fate that awaits him. The Epic of Wilhelm, his favorite book from the future, which was also a poem praising the legendary hero. There it is written that Rudolph will later reign as the dreaded emperor, and will be killed at a young age. Liza was also mentioned in the epic as the Frost Devil Maiden. It was recorded that she and the hero were deeply in love, falling for each other over a brooch. After an intense affair they swore their love for each other, but someone came and tore them apart. It was Rudolph who pried her away from his grasp, seeking to take advantage of the woman. Their love was shattered and filled with grief, causing her to close her heart once more. In the end, things ended in tragedy, as she personally ended the cruel emperor's life. The Baltic Empire fell, and Wilhelm founded the Sovlier Kingdom. Regardless, marrying her is a terrible idea, as he intends to stay alive, and has no desire to ruin relationships either. Now facing her, Liza asks what's wrong, noting his pale face. Maya comes to the rescue, saying he couldn't sleep as he was too excited for their dinner together. Coming close to her master, she whispered about the tea getting cold, because of his nervousness. Understanding that he should strike up a casual conversation, he thinks about how he asked his father to help him find a fiancé. If he were to break this engagement, it would be like spitting in the face of the emperor. The prince sips his tea, intending to call the deal off in an amicable way. Rudolph guesses that Liza must be shocked by the sudden engagement, and apologizes for the inconvenience. She falls silent at his words, and thanks him for the consideration. The girl was certainly surprised, but she insists that it is an overwhelming honor. However, her expression makes it obvious that she doesn't agree with her words. Since neither of them want to be wed, he asks that she have her father decline the proposal. To someone like her, who already has Wilhelm, she probably only agreed to the emperor's order. Seeing as it's too much of an honor for her, he prays that she declines the offer herself. Liza looks down, unmoving for a moment, until she insists that he pay it no mind, as she's completely fine with the agreement. He's surprised and wonders if he was too hasty. It should have been the perfect opportunity, but he figures that she must be trying to make him try harder. Even if she were to refuse, she'd need a better reason. As such, he stands, saying he's glad to be with her, and introduces himself with a deluge of lies, praising and putting himself on a pedestal. However, Maya chimes in, backing his claims up completely. She goes on about how he cleared the palace of corruption, even saving her, who was accused as a traitor. All in all, she concludes that he's a truly wonderful person. He begs that she read the room, although technically she is. If lying doesn't work, he goes to the other option, which is telling the truth. The prince then confesses, revealing how countless people aim for his life as he's still in line for the throne. If she were to marry him, she might get caught in something dangerous. This should be enough of a reason, but she surprisingly remains by his side, asking if there's a problem with that. Their bloodline has long been the symbol of the empire's military, and she herself practices spearmanship. Being scared just because of potential assassins would be an embarrassment to the family. Since this is no good as well, he tries to think of an even better reason to convince her. As he's deep in thought, Lisa then asks the prince to share some stories of when he was still young. Her request takes him by surprise, believing that there's nothing notable about his childhood. Looking back at his memories, his hand instinctively goes to his pocket, and he remembers the time with the little girl he saved and how she rewarded him with a coin. His eyes were still bright with hope back then. Until now, the coin rests in his pocket, but there's no need to tell her about that, as those memories are his and his alone. She calls to him again, prompting the young man for an answer. His mind gets dark. Many of the memories are infamous among nobles, and he wonders if she's trying to pry them out. She's probably going to gossip about it with Wilhelm later on, but he doesn't mind. Agreeing to dance to her tune, he stands up to tell his tale, that of the ridiculous, idiotic, and miserable comedy of his life. Rudolph goes on about how he's an illegitimate child and shouldn't be even in line to the throne. However, his mother pleaded desperately with the emperor, begging to make him the fourth prince. Maya insists that she must have done so in consideration of his future, but he asked his mother long ago about why he was even born. Back then, she answered without hesitation, saying she wanted to be part of the imperial family. He's just insurance to make way for her luxurious life, and it's his only purpose in life. When a mistress acts like the mother of a prince, unused nobles wouldn't be able to publicly condemn her. Therefore, he, as the illegitimate child, took the brunt of the indignation and anger. He took verbal and physical beatings most days. Everyone scorned him, and no one was there to stay by his side. It wasn't the gossiping or violence that got to him. Being ignored was the most painful of all. Even if he begged for help or excelled in areas, no one would even bat an eye. His father, the emperor, and even his own mother treated him like he shouldn't exist. As such, He did things they couldn't ignore, including breaking things on a whim, asking servants to do impossible tasks, punishing them, throwing tantrums, cursing, and becoming unreasonable violent. With that, the tyrant prince was born. Back then, he was so happy. As long as he was like that, dancing around for all to see, everyone would look at him. The story shocked the two ladies, and he asks what Lisa thinks. He questions what he's doing. There was no need to be so honest if he just wants her to hate him. Maya is in tears, saying it's cruel and in disbelief that he's been treated that way all this time. He realizes that she doesn't know the full story, as she became a maid just recently. This should be enough to make Lisa see him as a pathetic man pitied by his servants. There's no way the Frost Devil Maiden would accept an engagement with someone like him. However, to his absolute shock, Rudolph sees the girl crying, in tears from his story, not expecting it. He apologizes for rambling on too long and scurries to give her his handkerchief. Taking it out of his coat pocket in a rush, the coin hidden inside falls out and clatters to the ground, right in front of Lisa. He immediately drops down, pushing it to the floor and covering it with his hands. The young man silently puts it back in his pocket and dries her tears with his handkerchief. As he turned away, the girl started to speak about the gold coin, but he cut her off, saying it had nothing to do with her. The sternness in his words takes her by surprise. Later on, they finish the meal, and it's just about time to wrap up. Maya calls to her master from behind, urging him to take Lisa's hand. While walking together, he wonders why she cried earlier, and if she found it ridiculous enough to tear up. As they were surrounded with nothing but silence, Rudolph's head was filled with unanswered questions. They eventually reach her carriage. He thanks her for her time today, and encourages her to send a letter with her decision about the engagement, once she thinks about it. This confuses her, and he reiterates taking her time to think about it carefully. It would be easier for her to decline indirectly, but Lisa suddenly said that it wouldn't be necessary. To his shock and confusion, she accepts the engagement, despite all his effort to make her decline. The girl asks for his understanding and support, despite her lack of experience. The prince wobbles from her reply, expecting death to come after him soon enough. He questions how it all came to this, and turns away after nearly falling to his knees. Meanwhile, Lisa came close to Maya, whispering. She commended the maid, secretly telling her to keep observing Rudolph. Surprisingly, the maid is in on it, saying her wish is her command. It has been 3 days since Rudolph became engaged to Lisa, a woman fated to kill him in the future. Determined to avoid that fate, he's resolved to keep his distance, hoping to steer clear of any path that might bring them together. Yet it seems fate has other plans. To his disbelief, Lisa is now the one tending to his injuries. As soon as she finishes bandaging his wounds, she lifts a spoonful of herb-laced soup toward him, insisting he eat to help his recovery. Rudolph is sweating bullets, baffled by how he ended up in this predicament and sitting here with the very person he wishes to avoid. He quickly tries to brush off the situation, stammering that she doesn't need to feed him and apologizing for causing her any concern. He hastily explains that he's simply clumsy, prone to tripping over stairs and falling, so it's nothing she needs to worry about. Lisa remains silent, observing him with an unreadable expression until Maya enters, carrying a tray of tea. As she sets the tea down, Maya comments that the prince returned from a visit to the emperor earlier and came back with injuries. Lisa's expression hardens and she tells Rudolph that he is lying, as it is clear that his wounds aren't a result of a simple fall. Her gaze sharpens as she takes a step closer, examining his face with a determined intensity. Not peeling her eyes off of him, she asks who hurt him and why they did it to him. Rudolph finds himself speechless, struggling for a reply. He stands there, mute, his mind replaying the events of that day. On his way to the emperor, he got cornered by his brother the third prince, Robin and his cohort. A horrible brother, Robin told him that he was nothing but a filthy pig and his existence was unwanted. The cohort kicked him in the gut and he fell on the ground, used to the pain. Robin had been making him a punching bag ever since he was a kid. Assaulting the royal family is a grave sin normally punished with a death sentence, but in the palace, no one can save him from his brother. The palace is divided into 13 parts and all of his brothers are living in different ones, each managing their own. Rudolph is living in the Scorpio Palace and whenever he steps out of his estate, the abuse happens. Robin's servant lifted him but he mocked him by spitting on his face. To retaliate, the man slapped him across his face, causing more injuries. He doesn't want Lisa to know this side of him. However, he can't help his heart waver as he looks at her somber face. He wants to comfort her, but he stops himself. He can't open his heart to her because she will eventually become an enemy. Seeing that the two become silent, Maya intervenes and tries to relay what Rudolph must want to say to Lisa. He has dealt with the people who hurt him, so she doesn't have to worry anymore. Rudolph is stunned by Maya's impression of him. The servant tells him that since he has dealt with Mrs. Tapple, she knows that there is no way that he didn't avenge himself. Rudolph is inwardly impressed by this as the servant knows him really well. In a flashback, Rudolph let his brother and his servants hit him until they were done. Robin voiced out that he would be late for his appointment with the Emperor, so they need to go now. Just then, to their horror, the head butler was looking at them from afar and had witnessed the abuse that they did to Rudolph. The head butler helped Rudolph to stand while Robin and his servants were shaking from fear. The head butler faced Robin and told him that there were no escaping from what he did and he would surely report the incident to the Emperor. Robin tried to reason out that it was just a simple brotherly quarrel between him and Rudolph and he didn't mean to harm him. However, the head butler didn't buy his excuse and escorted Rudolph to meet the Emperor. Rudolph then casted a glance at Robin, who seethed in anger upon realizing that he planned it all. Rudolph smiled in victory. It was worth manipulating them into hitting his face, as he knew that the head butler would come if there was a delay in the Emperor's appointment. He walked away from the scene confident. With his knowledge of the future, he would try to change the course of his life and survive until the end. In his room, Rudolph is preoccupied, carefully observing Lisa, trying to decipher her intentions. Her intense gaze lingers on him, and to his surprise, she rises from her seat and steps even closer, narrowing the space between them. With a piercing look, she asks how his meeting with the Emperor went, clearly curious if his father had mentioned anything about their recent engagement. He recalls the events of the meeting vividly. Bowing respectfully before his father, he apologized to the Emperor for his lateness. His father, surprisingly indifferent, assured him it was no trouble and offered polite congratulations on his engagement. However, his mother soon shifted the Emperor's focus, urging him to ignore their son and enjoy her company instead. With little hesitation, the Emperor dismissed Rudolph without so much as hearing him out. Back in the present, Rudolph responds to Lisa, saying that the meeting went as usual and leaving out any real details. He's taken aback by the flicker of concern in her expression, a glimpse of genuine care that catches him off guard. Trying to steady himself, he questions why she's in the palace. With quiet confidence, Lisa explains she simply came to check on him, adding that it's only natural for her to worry about him and be curious about his activities since they are engaged. Rudolph's heart skips a beat at her candid answer. He scolds himself inwardly for allowing himself to be so easily affected by her warmth, reminding himself that his best chance for survival is to avoid her. Upon learning of his injuries, Lisa vows to visit Rudolph every day from now on, a promise that utterly shocks the prince. He tries to reason with her, saying it might be a bit excessive, but she refuses to back down, her determination unwavering. Meanwhile, in the Fockrantz mansion, Lisa thanks Maya for her role as Rudolph's personal maid, acknowledging that this has allowed her to be closer to him. Lisa instructs Maya to continue monitoring Rudolph closely, a request Maya accepts with a respectful bow as Lisa's loyal servant. Lisa lets out a delighted giggle, her cheeks turning pink at the mere thought of her fiancé. The image of Rudolph's dignified figure and gentle amber eyes warms her heart, making her feel blissful. She giggles again, and Maya has to gently snap her back to reality, noting how her true feelings for the fourth prince are written all over her face. Maya even suggests that if Lisa cares for him so deeply, she might try showing a bit more warmth toward him, as the prince might be confused by her reserved demeanor. Lisa, disappointed with herself, asks Maya if she really comes across as so distant. Maya confirms this, explaining that Lisa often resembles a statue with her stoic expressions. Frustrated, Lisa admits that she feels she messed up because being around Rudolph makes her incredibly nervous. She's had a crush on him for as long as she can remember. Every time she's near him, her mind goes blank, and her face becomes tense. Maya can't help but sigh, observing that while Lisa appears so confident outwardly, she's actually flustered and awkward. The servant then expresses concern about what might happen with Lisa's plan to visit the palace daily. Lisa reassures her that it doesn't take courage for her to do this. Rather, it's her commitment to protect Rudolph from everyone who has harmed him. Gripping her spear tightly, she vows to stand by his side, turning anyone who dares hurt him into rust on her weapon. She can't forgive anyone who has caused pain to the one she loves, nor can she forgive herself for being unaware of his suffering until now. Though impressed by her devotion, Maya gently advises her to put away the dangerous weapon, explaining that it's likely the third prince, Robin, who caused Rudolph's injuries. She also assures Lisa that as long as she remains by Rudolph's side as his personal maid, no one will dare disrespect him in the Scorpio Palace. Seeing the smug expression on Maya's face, Lisa can't help but feel a twinge of jealousy. She playfully argues with Maya, saying she too wants to hold a special place in her fiancé's heart. Then it dawns on her, meeting with Rudolph every day is essentially like going on daily dates with him. The thought makes her heart race and an overwhelming sense of nervousness takes over as she imagines spending so much time close to him. But Maya quickly pulls her back, advising her to get used to talking with Rudolph as soon as possible, especially with her birthday only a week away. Maya points out that Lisa will inevitably have a dance with Rudolph at her birthday party, and she won't have any choice but to speak with him then. Just the thought of dancing hand in hand with him nearly makes Lisa faint from a mixture of joy and anxiety. With resolve, she promises to talk to the prince more in the coming days, gradually building her confidence before her big day. The two friends then continue their playful bickering. Meanwhile, Rudolph is alone in his room, lost in thought. He can't seem to shake Lisa from his mind, wondering if she could truly be the Frostveil maiden from Wilhelm's epic that he has read about. Something about her recent actions feels genuine, as if her concern for him runs deeper than simple duty. He recalls the events surrounding Tappel's downfall and his search for a fiancé, realizing these incidents don't align with what he remembers of the future. A haunting suspicion stirs within him that perhaps his actions may be altering the timeline itself. Even as he tries to avoid Lisa, she pursues him with unyielding determination. He contemplates the unsettling possibility that he may be heading toward a future where he marries Lisa, and that he can't avoid his destined death. Meanwhile, in a distant castle, Wilhelm, the second son of the prestigious Sauvelier family, sits alone by a grand window, gazing into the dark night. His eyes burn with fierce resolve as he sips his wine, vowing to make Lisa his own on her birthday, no matter the cost. The next day, as agreed, Lisa visits Rudolph again. The two sit in quiet, facing each other, each lost in thought. Rudolph finds himself absorbed in pondering how he might navigate his current predicament, unaware that Lisa is already speaking to him. Maha gently nudges him to snap out of it, redirecting his attention to Lisa, who looks a bit embarrassed by his distraction. Later, Maha discreetly informs Rudolph that Lisa's birthday is fast approaching. As her fiancé, Rudolph is expected to attend the celebration and reminds him,